optional missions and collectibles, post-game objectives, DLC expansions. These are all different kinds of side content in video games. Or are they?
I don't know, but hey, unrelated question. Is Breath of the Wild a game that is entirely comprised of side content?
I'm not just talking about the 76 side quests or the Korok seeds. No, I mean the whole game. In Breath of the Wild, you only have 2 mandatory objectives. Complete a short tutorial area, and then defeat Ganon. And obviously, no normal player is actually gonna walk from the Great Plateau all the way down to Hyrule Castle and stand a chance. That's silly. But it is technically possible. People have done it before. So wouldn't that mean that the 120 shrines and even the 4 Divine Beast dungeons are technically just side content then? Think about it, they're all optional. You can skip as many of them as you want.
I'm guessing you still answer no, right? No, of course they're not side content. You're pushed towards them. They're marked as main objectives on the Sheikah slate, etc., etc. And I agree with all of that, but nevertheless, it highlights just how muddy this topic can get in practice, and I find that to be interesting for one specific reason. I aggressively go out of my way to avoid side content in video games.
This is due to a general lack of time, a desire to try out many different titles, and also thanks to ADHD, it sometimes takes a great deal of mental strain to just play something in the first place. I've always been like this. I have to concentrate just to make myself start up a game, and even when I'm having a good time, I still just want to bounce to something else. I often find myself pausing games just to Google how close I am to beating them. So yeah, not super big into side content personally. That being said, I recently completed all 157 side ops missions in Metal Gear Solid V: The Phantom Pain. MGS-V is an open-world action stealth game featuring 50 full, completed story missions, and then those 157 miscellaneous ones that basically let you go ape mode with your weapons and human stealing tech and whatnot. I love that game. I even love the dumbass plot twist at the end. That's right, my opinions are bad. And I love it so much that I decided to go through all those side ops just for funsies. I didn't do everything in the game, let's not go crazy here, but just the fact that I put so many hours into such blatant side content is extremely unusual for me. But something I found to be notable and what inspired this video is that despite being called side ops, and despite being wholly separate from the main objectives, there are actually a handful of them that you have to complete in order to unlock all the story missions. In fact, a few of them even play out as prologues and lead directly into a story mission.
But then those aren't side ops anymore, they're just ops, main ops, right?
Things weren't always like this. They used to be simple, or at least simpler. Back in the day, it wasn't possible for games to have much of any side content due to hardware constraints. I mean, look at the original Super Mario Bros. You walk in a mostly straight line for an hour, occasionally murdering Bowser along the way, and that's it. Here's a slightly harder mode for your troubles. Sure, even back then, some games did have optional collectibles and fetch quests and whatnot, but you wouldn't expect to find 8 expansive tow trucking sections in Kirby's Adventures, solely due to the limitations of the NES.
Yep, that's the only reason.
But over the next 30 to 40 years, consoles became bigger and stronger, more intimidating, and so too did the games. And somewhere down the line, it became an expectation for games to feature tons and tons and tons and tons of stuff to do. And this, I think, is where the lines began to blur. Sure, sometimes the concept of side content is pretty straightforward, like The Simpsons Hit and Run. That game has story missions that are all mandatory, bonus missions that aren't, and a bunch of optional collectibles, such as trading cards that kinda just spit out random references to the show. Pretty unambiguous, with everything even being neatly categorized in the pause menu. Or how about my favorite game, Super Mario Sunshine, which requires you to collect the first 7 shine sprites in each stage, while also featuring bonus shines, as well as those damn-ass blue coins to sell to a Pianta in a Tom Nook costume. Again, clearly side content, they're easy to ignore and don't contribute to you finally getting to take a bath with Bowser. The ultimate prize. But then compare Mario Sunshine to Mario Odyssey. Odyssey has 880 moons that don't require spending in-game money to collect, in addition to 119 free market moons that you can buy with cold hard fake cash, which I think is dumb. 119, that's way too many. But anyway, the game is designed in a way where each level has a few story moons, or triple moons or whatever, with many more of them hidden in every nook and cranny. Some are won after completing platforming challenges, while others are just kinda sitting there. And you have to collect a good chunk of them, any of them, before moving on to the next level. I think you can even skip most of the story moons too, though you're discouraged from doing so. I've seen people dismiss criticism of the lousier challenges in the game, you know, jump roping and all that garbage, by saying, oh, but those are optional, you're not expected to get all the moons. And yeah, that's true, but that also makes for a game that feels like it has a very small handful of main missions and then literally almost 1,000 side ones, well, at least in my opinion. God, I wish I liked Odyssey more. And similar to the Super Mario series, we have Elden Ring. Do you know how many bosses Elden Ring has? Because I don't, I just googled it and the answers are all over the place. I think it's 238, though many of them are repeats and reskins. But do you know how many bosses you need to beat in order to complete the main story? Again, neither do I. It seems to be between 11 and 14. I do not have time to sort through these Google results to be sure. But it doesn't really matter what the correct answer is, because even if these are just estimates, do you see the disparity between these numbers? It is nuts. And Elden Ring is not a game that any normal human being can just blaze through. It's very hard. I personally gave up at the Godskin duo. The point is, when you have a game that's so goddamn big, a game that everybody's going to experience very differently, when does the side content stop being side content? The gameplay loop of Elden Ring is pretty much just get your ass kicked by main boss X, run around wherever for 4 hours doing other stuff, defeat main boss X, and repeat with main bosses Y and Z and 8 to 11 other letters. So aside from those few mandatory sections, the whole game isn't really main content or side content. It all just is. Does that even make sense? Do you see how this can get a little muddy? And it gets even muddier with DLC. In my opinion, DLC is usually just side content on a stick, side content with extra steps, since you have to own the base game to be able to buy it, and it often just adds on to the main experience in some way. There are definitely exceptions, but for an example of what I mean, let's look at BioShock Infinite. And yeah, I know I'm not the first person to make the following point, but I don't care, I want to pile on. Anyway, BioShock Infinite. Fun game, breathtaking visuals. Does that annoying thing where it takes an oppressed character and literally has them threatening to kill a toddler, so the audience understands that the oppressor and the oppressed are both bad. Then in the otherwise fine Burial at Sea DLC, that rhymed, it turns out that, oh, actually, that character was just pretending to want to kill the toddler in order to help her cause by 4D chess manipulating a different character to kill her or something.
Great, so you're telling me that I paid money to make the stupid plot point even stupider.
You know your DLC is just the equivalent of a side quest or honestly just an optional audio log when it starts retconning the events of the base game while still feeling totally superfluous. Or hey, let's look at Sonic Frontiers. Okay, I'll be honest, I personally didn't really enjoy Frontiers. The first 2 islands were fun, and I think they could have been released on their own as a little Bowser's Fury kind of thing, but then the game just keeps going. But I recognize that the title has a ton of fans, and I definitely see its strengths. One strength being that Sega is releasing a bunch of free DLC. That's really cool. They easily could have nickel and dimed this stuff and made a ton of money. But again, speaking personally, I never really like it when games get small bits of add-on content like this. Even if I did love the title, I doubt I'd boot it up again just to complete extra open zone challenges or to play as Amy. I know they're teasing a new story as well, but unless that new story truly feels like its own unique thing, when I'm done with a game, I'm done with a game, you know? But yeah, well, it's definitely great that Sega is releasing so much for free, and I get the strategy of updating a game over time to keep it relevant. I'm not really a fan of what is essentially just a bunch of side content being dolled out like this, at least for single player games. I remember when people were saying the same thing about Kirby Star Allies, and yeah, it's just odd, kind of a bad deal in my opinion, free or not. This stuff is supposed to supplement the main experience, not headline a new one, and breaking it up like this just kind of highlights how secondary it all feels. Look, honestly, I don't have much of a point here, because ultimately, labels like main content, side content, etc. aren't facts of the universe. They're made up and can mean whatever they need to mean for each game. But it's still interesting, you know? As video games have changed over time, so have the ways we talk about and interact with them. Decades ago, games literally couldn't support side content without their cartridges bursting into flames. It wasn't really a concept on anyone's mind. Not long after, what constituted side content became fairly straightforward. But now, in a time where open worlds and non-linear player-driven gameplay are basic features of big budget titles, there are thousands, maybe millions of players who never even bothered with the main story of Skyrim and just dicked around exploring for hundreds of hours instead. That became their main story for Skyrim, and that's really cool for them. I couldn't possibly understand being a side content ignorer and all, but I just think it's fun to think about this stuff, muddy or not.
Now you'll excuse me, I have to go back to dicking around in Tears of the Kingdom for hundreds of hours. This one doesn't count. Goodbye.